Yeah, hello everybody to this week's developer session. We want to keep it quite short today, and I think mainly we will talk about the monitoring system, what Florian is working on, and the discussion about testing frameworks will be postponed for maybe next week, as well as the new trade protocol. As it would be good to have first the tech spec updated so everybody can review the tech spec and then have a discussion about this. Okay, then let's get started. Maybe Florian, you want to take over and maybe show quickly the current state of the monitoring?
Yes, of course. So I'd like to start with the, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so I wanted to start with this a little overview over the architecture of the monitoring system as it is planned. As of now, the second release is about to go out, and we have one monitoring node, like the one in the middle, and one monitoring service. I'm not sure how we can achieve multiple monitoring nodes with one service, but we'll figure that out when it is time. So we have this one monitoring service. The monitoring service is the Grafana open source project, which is very, very nice. It's a lot. It has been a lot of work that went into the Grafana project, and it's really nice. The backend for the so the Grafana project is the GUI part, the user interface part. The history part is currently the open source project named Graphite. Graphite is basically just a database where you can send occurrences of certain of stuff. Yeah. So you have a value and you have a timestamp, and this the Graphite instance does memorize the timestamp and the value. You can add the text to the value so that you know what the value means. But basically, you have a value and a timestamp.
Sorry to interrupt you. Is this Graphite somehow related to the other project because it sounds so similar, or is it just by chance?
To Grafana, you mean?
To Grafana, yeah. Mm-hmm.
No, absolutely not. No, Grafana is only the GUI. So Grafana has means. We have been lucky because there is a plugin shipped already with Grafana that can access a Graphite database. That is the link. Mm-hmm. But the two projects do not have anything in common. Graphite is for collecting the data, and Grafana is for displaying the data.
And what kind of data is stored? Is it just a kind of a JSON object that is persisted, or is it some special binary format?
I believe by default it is implemented with the Whisper database. That's a Python thing. It's a fixed size database where you can configure for which time spans you want the data and how fine-grained the data is. For example, you can say, well, I want every minute of data in the last day and only data accumulated to half an hour for the past 2 years, for example. So this is really special to Graphite. You can use other database systems if you want, but I found that this default is actually quite nice. If the need arises in future, we can of course switch, but I think 2 years of data is, for starters, enough. Okay, so that is the architecture. Are there any questions regarding the architecture? No? Okay, so the monitor node looks like this. I tried to keep the monitor node as simple as it possibly can be, meaning that the seed monitor, this little thingy here. Oh, nice! There is something quite wrong. Okay, this very monitor is starting up a complete Bisq application. The whole peer-to-peer network thing, the whole node, it gets connected, it stays connected, it uses up resources of the seed nodes and so on. What I tried to do is limit the dependencies on the rest of the Bisq project. I do use the peer-to-peer stuff. I do use the Tor stuff, of course, but I do not use anything like a persisted data store or something like this, or how is it called, peer manager stuff. I do not use this until now. Maybe the need arises someday, but I managed to keep it rather simple. Reason is I have more control over what data I want, what data I get, how often I get the data, and how big my footprint in the network can be. So, for example, I go over to our Tor metrics page, which is already up and running for a month or so. For example, if we take the diagram at the top right here, it's the Tor round trip time, and for this graph to create this graph, I only use one Tor instance, no Bisq at all. I just do a HTTP request to a non-net address. For other stuff, like, for example, if I switch over to that, if I want some trading stats, I only use what I need to get the open offers, for example. I do not boot the whole Bisq stuff up. So one metric is the Tor round trip time, for example. Another metric is the open offers, for example. There is a common configuration system behind this. There is a scheduler integrated. So if you want a new metric, you just have to implement the metric interface and do whatever you want. That means we can also do, for example, the exchange rates, monitor exchange rates or fee estimation, or do a BSQ by price monitoring, because we do not need the whole Bisq for a metric, but just the data we want. So that is the architecture and the monitoring node in detail. And if there are no questions regarding this architecture, I would go on and do a kind of a walkthrough on the Grafana side and what we already have. Are there any questions? No? Okay. So what do we have already? If you go to Monitor Bisq Network, you get to this very page. And I just played around a bit with the stuff, and just added 5 minutes ago the system health tab on the right, because the Bisq monitor start dashboard is kind of boring by including only these 3 buttons. But let's get to each of these areas. For starters, we have the Bisq Tor metrics. Maybe I can get rid of the Bisq because it's just the Tor metrics. If I click the Tor metrics, we have a bunch of diagrams. Of course, nothing of this is fixed. We can change it anytime if something new arises, or if there is not data, there is data we want to see but do not see at the current state. But basically, you can do these fields of interest. One field is like this. You can drag it around. So this is the most nice thing about Grafana. Each of these fields can hold information you can configure as you like. In this very page, I have summed up anything we collect regarding the Tor, the underlying Tor network. There is nothing, there's no Bisq involved, it's just Tor. The reason why we do this is there has been a time where the network was really crowded, and that the Bisq network was really crowded, and Tor had some issues with denial of service attacks and so on. So the reason for this dashboard is that we can see how well Tor is performing, and Tor only, nothing to do with Bisq. For example, we see that the average startup time of Tor is about 6 seconds. So if you download the app, the Bisq app, get it running the first time, the Tor startup time is 6 seconds. So that means you run the app, the app unpacks the binaries, installs the binaries, starts the binaries until the Tor binary is ready to do requests. So it takes 6 seconds until you can do a request and ask, for example, the seed nodes for data. The second important thing is the hidden service startup time. The hidden service startup time is the time following after the 6 seconds. So if the Tor binaries are in place and we can use Tor to browse the net, Bisq starts to publish its hidden service, and this is the average for over 3 hours, and we see the timely data, how long it takes to get the hidden service up and running. And we see the Tor startup time does fluctuate a little bit. The hidden service startup time on the bottom right is rather stable. It takes 32 seconds. And bear in mind, this whole system runs on a DigitalOcean server, so there is no internet service provider in between which can maybe slow things down. This is a public IP, and the host does nothing else but this metric stuff.
Sorry, Florian.
I'm sorry, I think I just lost you.
4 hours, but then nothing is displayed. Is there a specific reason why that's that case?
I did not catch anything you said because there are some connection issues, but I think you're talking about this slot where there is no data.
No, sorry.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. On the top, you selected last 3 hours in the interface.
Yes.
Is it possible? So if I access 24 hours, the graphs are not rendered. Is there a specific reason or something that has to be configured?
I'm not. I'm still onto it. So the 6 hours works. The 12 hours doesn't. I don't know. Maybe there is some timeout issue. I will look into that if the time is if I have the release out. Mm-hmm. So basically, it should work. And I haven't found anything that the configuration is wrong or something like this. Mm-hmm. So okay. We have only 6 hours for now.
Okay.
The last thing on the Tor dashboard of interest is the Tor round trip time. And we see we are quite low. There is half a second. The Tor round trip time is measured by doing a HTTP request to the onion, to the hidden service of the Tor project website. So they should be reachable anytime and should be, there should not be any denial of service or something like this that will slow the round trip time down. Only reason I do this is because we can see Tor is working or Tor is in some difficulty, has some difficulties. We see there is a half a second, but there has been a time where one little request took 43 seconds. So we get an idea of how Tor performs, and based on this information, we can say, well, if there is some network issue or Bisq is in trouble, we can say, well, Tor is one of the major reasons that Bisq is in trouble, or Bisq is in trouble because of Bisq and not because of Tor. Okay, so if we go back to the initial dashboard, the new release is going to add this peer-to-peer stats dashboard, and it's not quite finished. There are always there's some data missing because I restarted stuff and just to get rid of all the runtime issues and so on. But okay, the first thing I want to talk about is the top right, the peer-to-peer network load. The peer-to-peer network load is, I mean, there is data that is not displayed there, but I come to this later. The peer-to-peer network load is the data we get as a difference from the last request I made to the seed nodes. So, for example, if I hover over this thingy, I see there is one trade statistic and there is 11 offer payloads since the last measurement. So that stuff got added. Same here. One trade statistic and one offer payload is new in the network. If I take the right before noon, there is no data at all new in the network. So, for example, if there is some denial of service attack ongoing or something like this, or someone does add 100 offers or something like this, we would see in this time slot there have been 100 offers added. Of course, this does not include the remove or refresh broadcast messages, but that is for the next release.
Florian, so if we see an extreme spike over a longer time in this chart, is there a way to get the onion address that is connected to this amount of content that is spread in the peer-to-peer network?
No, not at the moment. So I get it.
I think that wouldn't be probably not possible because it's from the broadcast messages. And when you receive a message from the network, you don't know who is the originator. In the offer, in some type of messages, there is the onion address inside, like in the offer, but in other messages, not like the trade statistics or account witness. And this data you received from one seed node, but the seed node received it from somewhere, from all his peers were what he's connected to.
Yeah, so maybe at some time we can unpack a offer payload and see who is the creator of the offer, but not at the moment. It's only that we see how much traffic is in a time span is on the peer-to-peer network as a broadcast. So if we have 0, then the network there is no traffic. If we have a spike and say there is 3,000 messages in a time span of 5 minutes, then there is heavy load on the network.
Yeah, and this message is also, those are only these objects what we are saving in the network locally, also in run, like the offers or trade statistics. Those doesn't include, like Florian said, the add or remove messages, or the offer refresh messages, or the ping and pong messages, or there are many other messages which are flowing around, and yeah, those are not handled here.
Manfred, is a ping message is not a broadcast message.
No, it's not a broadcast message.
Okay, so we would never be able to see the ping message, but we of course get the refresh and the remove messages for all the broadcast messages we can track. Real peer-to-peer messages, point-to-point messages are not, we cannot track them. Simply not possible. Okay, so that is the network load. In the middle, on the left side, there is this seed node message snapshot. That is basically the same thing as Manfred has in his last data column. If we hover over this, we see there is an alert, an arbitrator filter, mailbox, storage payload, and offer payload, and the numbers behind. So we see at 11:52 Central, I think it's UTC it is, we had 231 offers. If we find, at 11:45, we had 227, so 5 less or something like this. That is basically what Manfred's monitor already did. Then we have the max round trip time. The max round trip time is, I take a list of seed nodes, send them a ping, and see how long it takes until I receive the pong message. So I basically hitchhike the keep alive mechanisms to see how long it takes for a seed node to respond. So we see, for example, there are 2 seed nodes configured at the time, and one took 3 seconds to answer the request, and one took 1 second. At 11:09 or something like this, we had 3. There we had 400 milliseconds, 22 seconds, and 1 second. So we get an idea how well the seed nodes are connected, and if they are there. Okay, I said this is the maximal value. So each measurement, I think I take 5 measurements for each value, and then I calculate, and that we can see here. I do have a couple of different values available. There is a maximum value, a minimum value. There is the P50, so the median value, I do have a P25 if necessary, and a P75, and average is also there if we need it. However, I believe that using the maximal round trip time is the best instrument to judge, because maybe subsequent requests to the same host get there faster because the network is already primed for this very request. So it would not reflect a user that only started his Bisq application because there is no history to his Bisq application. So if the Bisq application starts and it initially connects to a seed node, it would probably be the maximum time. So if the maximum time is about 5 seconds, I believe we are green.
So it's basically the time what you need to make to open a connection to another node. Probably most of those 5 seconds are probably the connection establishing time, or
probably yes. Although I observed that it is not always the first ping that takes the longest time. So I'm not quite sure what the mechanisms are behind this data, but I believe that the maximum time is a good starting point. We can, of course, use the median or the average or something like this. Yeah, open for discussion. As said before, nothing of this is set in stone. Then another interesting part is this seed node diff diagram. This is basically kind of the thing that Manfred had in his last column. So I take a reference source. So it is it's alphabetically, I think it's the 723 seed node, and say, well, this seed node is my reference. So this seed node has always 0 difference. However, if another seed node, for example, here, yes, then I see, well, the 723 seed node is of course the reference seed node, so there's a difference to itself. But the other 2 seed nodes in this diagram, one is 2 messages short and one is 3 messages short. And we have the same thing on the plus side, of course. There, another seed node has 2 messages more than the reference seed node.
And here the messages are any message, so like the offer messages or like the offer objects, or
it is the whole number of messages. There is no type to the messages anymore.
Be somehow good, I think, because there are some objects like the arbitrators or the filter or the alert, which are much more important, as they should always be the same basically. And the offers and trade statistic are usually not 100% in sync. So maybe it would be good to group this together, that the kind like the high priority objects are in one diagram and they should be basically always on 0. And the other are usually fluctuating a little bit by a few percent.
Yeah, we can do that. We can do that, of course. The main...
Is it possible for a user to create a new configuration locally?
No.
Also, you have to do it that you have another diagram where where there are only 2 objects or something like this.
No, the admins have to do it. You cannot do it on your own. The main idea behind this very diagram is that if you see that there is a difference, so this is the number of messages. There is no percentage included. This is just the number of messages. We can do, and that is the next thing I want to talk about. We can set alerts to the whole thing. Maybe you have guessed it because there is an alert list on the top left. You see, there is this green heart besides the title of this area. If I click the green heart, let's see if it works. So I have this alert, and I have set the alert if the last value over an hour, it is of course not set in stone, it's just for demonstration purpose. And if any value of this query is outside the range of -25 to +25, an alert gets triggered. So if a seed node goes out of sync massively, for example, and has a difference to another seed node of plus or minus 25 messages, an alert is triggered. And so we can get notified, not now in this release, but in the next release, hopefully, notified per mail or in Slack or something like this that one seed node has troubles or multiple seed nodes have troubles.
Cool. And you can make this alert config for every diagram. So when we would have two diagrams where one is the high prio object and the other the low prio object, we can have two different settings. And
of course, and we can also do let me see. Maybe we can calculate that we say that if one seed node has a difference of 25% of the whole messages currently, which currently should be on the seed node, maybe we can calculate this as well. So we can do a percentage range in the alert. Okay, so this was this alert, and we see we have this overview here, and the seed node diff alert. We have no seed node that has a significantly different number of messages available, and so we are green. Manfred, you said that arbitrator messages are maybe more important than trade statistic messages. You see, I have added an alert to this diagram as well. So if you look there, we have this in the very first line is the alert, the number of alert messages, the number of arbitrator messages, filter messages, and so on. And this very alert is configured to trigger if and only if, let's see, there is the series B is the arbitrator messages. And I can use this series to say, well, I use the series B 1 hour to now and so on, last value. And if this is below 2, we get an alert. Of course, this data is just a single seed node for now. I'm not quite sure how we can do a diagram for each and every seed node, but we will conquer this as well. But we have the possibility to say, well, if a seed node has less than a static number of certain kind of message, we want to have an alert. This is also possible. And last but not least, there is this diagram here on the right in the middle that does this nice slow flash and has a broken heart up here. I figured we can use the round trip time to figure out if a seed node is alive or not. And you see, I did have these 3 seed nodes live at 11:10 today. And then I did some reconfiguring, also visible that the data here below is not existing. I switched to another seed node, and then the alert said, well, I do have 5 seed nodes, but I only received data from 2. And that's for over 2 hours. It says here that the red line here is the time when the alert is triggered. So at this time, the alert got triggered because 1 or more of the seed node values have been not there. If I do add the seed nodes I configured before, the alert should vanish. So basically, we have the means to see if a seed node is as it is now. We see if the seed nodes, if one of the seed nodes is gone, or we cannot say if there is one that is in fault or there is multiple in fault. We can just say one of the seed nodes or more is at fault. Maybe I find some way to do a better display in the alert list, for example. But that is the status I have planned for the upcoming release. Okay.
This editing, what you just showed, is only possible when you are logged in, or because
yes.
I just tried. Yeah.
Yes.
And for canceling the alert, or probably also when you're logged in, probably you can reset the alert then, or?
I must honestly say I have not tried it. I doubt that you can reset the alert. You can reconfigure the alert to maybe exclude some data. For example, to ignore a certain seed node, as in this special case. But
so when there have been a thing that one seed node had a problem and then it's online again, would be good that the alert state will not stay then for over the next days or whatever. That is just for this time.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
Okay. It's in the last hours, or
I can show you the configuration. There is the evaluation time, and the alert gets, in this case, evaluated every 5 minutes, and if in this one, if at 1 minute, in a time frame of 1 minute, the alert is not to trigger, then the alert is gone.
Okay.
So if I press the test rule for the deaf people out here, I see, well, I do have we have an issue, and I see, well, there is a null value for this data thingy. There is null value. We have these two, and there is a null value again. If none of these values are null, the alert will vanish latest after 6 minutes.
Okay, so Florian, so it means that 5 of our of our 5 seed nodes, 3 are not accessible, and just 2 are accessible at the moment.
This is be aware that at the moment it is a development configuration. So there are only 2 seed nodes configured for me to test if the alerting works. So before doing the final release, I will of course add all seed nodes we have, and we have more data and can use it actually in real life.
At the moment, all seed nodes are fine.
Have you restarted the thing?
Yeah, I have restarted. I need to restart then the monitor because it keeps then when you run an error, it doesn't reset. Only restarting the monitor, it's black again. And I had again an issue, still out of memory issues.
Okay, so that is the peer-to-peer monitoring as it is now.
One more question, Florian. Is it possible to display where the legend is also their actual numbers, or I mean the numbers are over time, of course. I was just wondering.
The actual, yeah, well, you can. For starters, you can hover over the diagram.
Yeah. Then you see it.
If we want, we can add a table.
That would be nice. Yeah.
We do have the numbers in plain. We do have a heat map. So the heat map is let's try it fast. Select the metric. Take this from every average. Yeah, well, you see, it creates buckets. There is one count, for example, and this one count in the time range of 1 second, half a second to 1 second, and there is 1.5 seconds to 2 seconds. And it gets lighter. I don't know what's behind after white, but the white thingy says, well, there is a count of 2, and the more occurrences in this bucket there is, the different is the display. So we have a couple of tools, but I do not know if, for example, this heat map is very helpful for our purpose. So I don't know. Maybe sometime we have a great opportunity to use it, but at the moment, well. What data, what numbers would you like to see?
No, I'm not so sure. It was just I mean, probably when this seed node message snapshot is separated in 2 diagrams, where one is the priority data, like the alerts and the arbitrators and so on, and the other is the trace statistics and the accounted witness data, I think then it's probably good enough, because then you see that basically with arbitrate and those messages should be always the same. There shouldn't be any change, and the other can fluctuate.
We can configure the alerts accordingly. So I believe this whole diagram thingy is mainly that we can have a quick look how the network, how Bisq, how the peer-to-peer network is performing. If there is some issue, we configure the alerts accordingly beforehand, and we get a notification that there is something wrong. And if there is something wrong, we can take a look what happens, what happened in detail. Yeah. But I do not think that a table with a lot of numbers does. It's easier to understand if there is some colored lines and shades, and maybe we grasp it faster if it's displayed like this.
One other question. So with the database, basically all the historical data are accessible. It doesn't matter when you're restarting the monitor node, there's maybe a gap, but besides that, there's no problem.
No, this is persisted. We should think eventually about backing up the data somewhere.
Yeah, that would be good.
As a second.
In DigitalOcean, you have a backup service, so it does automatically backups. That's quite useful. And then the whole server get backed up, and
yes, I believe we should discuss the backup stuff separately, because as I said before, the database is a fixed size database. So if the data gets older, measurement points, data points are dropped. So we only have every half an hour for a year-old diagram, for example, where we now have every 5 minutes. So maybe we want to back up the data, only the data, so that we maybe, as I said, we have to discuss this, what we want and what makes sense. But backup is, I think we can leave it like this, like now, until the settled release is out, and then we can discuss about backup.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, looks really nice. Maybe it would also make sense to have one separate view, just with an alert list with very readable labels.
Yeah, maybe like this.
Just if they have any if they have any issues.
Like so.
Sorry. Yeah, like something like that. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's the root. Okay, that's the dashboard. Yeah.
For example.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, and just so if they see everything is green, then everything is fine. But if they have, for example, problems contacting an arbitrator, and they see that there are at least one arbitrator is not connected, if that there might be an issue there, and they don't spam support forums or so, and just wait until everything is green and then try again.
And with the alerts, you can configure it probably by email so that every seed node, as a seed node operator, receives an email when there is a problem with one seed node, for instance. Right?
I'm sorry, I did not catch that.
No. With the alerts, you can configure emails so that you get the email alert. And
the feature list says so, yes, but I have to figure out how we do it because it's on the Monitor Bisq Network domain, and I believe it's done via sendmail binary, and yeah, but basically it should work, yes.
And you can probably configure that for each seed node there is one email address, because there are different operators for the seed nodes, so that the operator receives the email.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know, but I believe this Grafana thing is very, very powerful, and I believe that this is possible.
Cool.
Okay, so the last thing I just added a few minutes ago, well, an hour ago, is the starting point for trading statistics, for example. We can have the own dashboard for this. And I just picked the data I already have. We see, well, we actually, right now, or at 12:18 something, we had 240 morphos. And we can add other trading statistics here as well.
So why are these numbers going down? So is this also that you are requesting the data from a seed node?
It's actually the same data, yes. And behind there's no data because my local seed, my local monitor just died, and there is no new data coming in.
One more question, Florian. I think you mentioned it in the beginning with the offer payload. At the moment, we cannot for example, create separate charts for example, for separate markets like the Monero market or a Bitcoin Euro market, to have these open offers, not just only for total offers, but also for certain markets.
Yeah. As of now, it's only the total amount, because I just query the seed node and ask for the data, and then, well, the seed node says, well, I have 240 open offers. If we want to have this, we can unpack the open offer messages and maybe extract and divide, so that we can have either the creator or the market, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for market, it would be interesting to see if you have a decrease in volume on certain markets, if it's directly related to the offers that are available, or if you have, for example, a certain number of offers triggers an organic growth also on the trading volume. So it's just to maybe to use this information in a visual way, and it's easier to find correlation on that.
I totally agree.
This data is probably available over the market server, as on the markets page, and I assume basically you could get all this data and create your diagram with correlations as well. Okay, so if you have any shortcuts, please let me know. Yeah, I mean, we have this market server, which was earlier a web page itself, and now it's only an API, which is used by the markets page on the Bisq web page, and it just there runs a node, a headless node, similar like the seed node there, and that writes the data as JSON files to disk, and the PHP application is using this data. So there's HTTP API for requesting some data, and basically the number of offers for currencies and so on that should be available there, and the number of trades as well. I'm not sure how much we should overlap those two areas. If I think at the moment maybe it's better to keep the monitor more low level and technical, without basically deep package inspection that you look what in the data is inside. But of course, maybe at some point it makes sense, or we need it, and or we extend it. But then we would have basically a second parallel statistics about this data, and maybe at some point we can shut down the market server when we find out that it works as good with this or better.
Yeah, we can for starters we can use the market server.
Yeah, I mean it's also used by third parties, and you could get some kind of like DDoS risk. So probably it's not good to mix this together. At least, yeah. I mean, a monitor server will probably this monitor system will probably not have an open API or whatever, because yeah, it's important for us to really notice and that it doesn't get that doesn't have a risk to get DDoS or whatever. And with the market server, yeah, it can always happen when you have an open API. But it's also relevant data, yeah. Then the third-party web pages doesn't display the trade volume or whatever. But when we don't know how the health of the system, of the peer-to-peer system is, it has high impact for us.
Manfred, regarding the open offers, but on the markets API, we don't have historical data. It's just always what is available at the very given moment, I think.
Yeah, but anybody could basically request it every 5 minutes or 10 minutes and put it in a database, and you could create historical data out of this.
If you remember back how this thing is made, we can have different monitoring nodes, because well, the name monitoring node is maybe not very correct, because this monitoring node does not have, must not have, may not, or may actually not have any connection to the peer-to-peer network. So we could configure a second node, a second monitor, to only do the market stuff and get the market data, and then send it to the monitoring, to the Grafana thingy. So that is possible. So we would have a separation and
yeah, because with that basically the risk when somebody, also when the second node would have an API also that people can request the data from there, and when it would be attacked, then the worst case, this node goes down, but the other node is not affected.
Exactly.
By Grafana as well. That might be interesting, because the market server, it's written in PHP, and basically we don't have an active developer who is maintaining it, and so, and yeah, it would be probably a more future-proof solution to maybe move over in that direction. I just don't want to get lost too much, because yeah, we shouldn't work now on the monitoring for the next year. We should basically, it's a tool to improve the peer-to-peer system and optimize it. So, but midterm also it might, or maybe somebody else can work on this then. That's not so related to the peer-to-peer system anymore. But it's interesting concept that to have then parallel nodes with different, for different tasks and different risk exposures and so.
Yes, but as you said, we could work on the monitoring for the next 5 years, full time, I think, but we should prioritize what we want and what we should do in the upcoming months, let's say. And that would be, if there are no questions left for the Grafana thingy, I would proceed to my last point for the monitoring system discussion. Are there any questions? No. Okay. So there are a lot of checks, but of course, not all of them are yet done. Prior to this call, I rearranged some of the steps or tasks in order to I had a discussion with Manfred today, I think, and we rearranged. We discussed a little, and I rearranged the tasks according to this discussion. And now there is. I want to ask you guys what should we do in the next couple of months? Let's say, what should we do for the settled release? Is there another release behind, and what should be the contents of this release? Maybe we can help. We do this together. I think in this discussion already a new thingy appeared, because namely the trait statistics. Maybe we can add this to the list of future tasks, or maybe already the settled release. Please let me know, maybe in the issue, what would be interesting data to have in the monitoring, and also the time frame when this data would be interesting, and what priority this data might have. So that would be the last thing I ask of you for today. Yes, but maybe we can get a new list and an updated list, and see where we stop working on the monitor for a little, maybe behind the settled, after the settled release, and yeah, maybe we can discuss a little on the roadmap of the monitor.
Yes, sounds good.
Yeah, great. Sorry, guys, I think I have to leave now, because my meeting room is booked from someone else afterwards. I didn't expect it to take that long. Is there any bigger issue that is covered? Otherwise, I just join a couple of minutes later.
No, I think we would wrap up anyway soon. Yeah.
Okay. Then sorry about that. Yeah, I will watch the recording afterwards.
No,
thanks.
Bye.
Talk to you. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, from my side, I think